My friends and my family are all here. They've been here all of their life. And this state is one that I consider my home. That's why I fight so hard for New York. That's why I fight for health care for New York, our fair share on tax dollars, our fair share on transportation dollars. I've been on the forefront, and I'm not afraid to say I've been a partner of George Pataki, the governor. I think it's a good thing to have a partnership with the state government to make sure that together we can deliver and protect our state.
Mrs. Clinton, Pat Crowley says Western New York seems to be forgotten sometimes, and New York City gets more than its fair share through her prism.
Well, I wish what the congressman just said about his record were the case, because New York doesn't get the fair share. That $15 billion that goes to Washington creates a balance of payment problem. And yet it has improved. It was worse under President Bush. It's made some improvement, but it has a long way to go. And it is one of the key issues that Senator Moynihan has worked on. I've come forward with some specific proposals. Now that we have a surplus, I believe that we could offer a win-win solution in the Congress to change the Medicaid formula. I talked about this first in Albany, and I see the mayor is here, and they know that we don't get nearly enough to reimburse us for what we spend on Medicaid. We only get 50% of the cost that we should get. Well, what we should be doing, instead of getting just 50 cents on a dollar, is getting more. And the way to do that is to provide a choice, given the surplus, so that a state like New York could have a better deal without trying to run the political gauntlet of taking money away from a state like Texas, just to name one, that gets 62 cents. I think there's a lot we could do creatively that would begin to change these funding formulas. But when it comes to Western New York, I have an absolute commitment to turning the economy around, using all my contacts any way that I can, and I will be there day in and day out to get it done.
I have an email question regarding Jonathan Pollard, the American naval officer who betrayed the country, was sentenced to life for espionage and treason. The Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Director of the FBI, and the head of the CIA have all said, do not pardon him, do not grant him clemency. Do you support clemency for Mr. Pollard? And if so, why would you even consider it?
Well, Tim, what Mr. Pollard did was a terrible crime against the United States. It was a great breach of trust and national security, and he pled guilty, was convicted, and is serving a very long prison term. When I looked into this, I think that everyone who has an opinion about it agrees that what he did was absolutely wrong. The question for me is around the due process issues concerning the way that he was sentenced. It is something that I have questions about, and I believe that fair-minded people should ask similar questions. There was secret evidence put in before the court that has never been revealed. Only people with high security clearance can see it. And two men whom I respect very much have reached different opinions based on reviewing that material. On the one hand, Senator Lieberman believes strongly that no action with respect to clemency should be granted. And Senator Schumer, who's also reviewed the material, believes that it should. Neither my opponent nor I are in a position to have seen that material, so far as I know. So we, like every other American, are in a position of not knowing how to form an opinion about this. But I am troubled by the due process issues that I think we should ask questions about and get further information about so that we can make our own judgments.
The writer asked, is there any other spy you would consider pardoning, or is this just a play for Jewish votes in New York?
I don't know any other spy who was sentenced in the way that Mr. Pollard was. If there is such a person, I would be equally concerned about the process. I'm not prejudging what any outcome should be, because I feel very strongly he committed a serious crime against our country. And I am very conscious of the important national security issues that are raised by what he did. But again, I will just say that it does bother me as an American and as a lawyer that there was evidence presented that no one has seen, and I think we should ask questions about that.
Mr. Lazio?
I just want to go back, if I can, to the last question, because, again, it gets back to this issue of credibility. Mrs. Clinton talks about changing the formula on Medicaid. They've had 8 years to change the formula on Medicaid. And the one opportunity to help the Medicaid program in New York, the president vetoed it, and my opponent stood by. You know, whether it's the FLAN, Puerto Rican terrorists, or Jonathan Pollard, American national security should never be jeopardized or undermined or even questioned because of politics. In fact, December of 1998, President Clinton made a statement. He said that he was going to complete a review on Jonathan Pollard by January 11th of 1999 and issue an explanation as to whether or not clemency would be granted. And of course, the president is the only one who can issue clemency. Well, 600 days have gone by and still no answer. I think the president owes it to us to make a decision, make it public, and let's get on with things.
Do you believe Mr. Pollard should be pardoned?
Well, I believe, again, that I have not had access to the kind of classified information that's necessary. The only person who's in a position to make that decision and the only person who's got the authority to actually issue a pardon is the president himself.
A question from Mark Hamister, who's here in the audience. Much of America is watching this race. Can both of you set an example to the rest of the country and renounce the use of soft money ads for the rest of this campaign? Mr. Lazio?
Absolutely. As somebody who has twice voted for McCain-Feingold, who's a strong believer in campaign finance, who's got the support of the leader on the campaign finance movement, John McCain, I think it's my responsibility to try and lead on this effort. As America looks to New York, this is an opportunity for us to be able to say, we don't have to rely on soft money. And my campaign has not aired one commercial nor raised $1 in soft money. My opponent has raised soft money by the bucket loads. And I guess they've learned how to raise soft money over many years. Let me say this, though. We have an opportunity to do something important here tonight. I have right here a pledge that I sent over to my opponent. It's a ban on soft money pledge. I'm willing to say we will neither raise nor spend a dime of soft money and ask all outside groups to stay away if my opponent is willing to do the same. And you know what, Mrs. Clinton, if you agree to do this, we'll be making a huge statement about character and trust to the rest of the country. And let's get it done now and today. Let's make sure we bring all the press in and actually nail a deal down that we can be proud of.
No soft money and no outside groups advertising on New York television.
Yeah, as my opponent is willing to agree to the same. I'm willing to not raise a dime of soft money, not spend a dime of soft money, and call on all outside groups to stay away from this race and not spend any money in furtherance of my campaign.
And you'll make phone calls to Governor Pataki if need be.
Or make any phone calls.
Mrs. Clinton.
Well, Tim, you know, back in May, I made exactly that offer. I said, let's forego soft money, but let's also be sure we don't have these independent expenditures like the one we just talked about concerning Senator Moynihan and the fake ad. And I said, you know, if you would do this, I would certainly abide by it. If you will, get signed agreements from all your friends who say they're raising $32 million and will not be running so-called independent ads, will not be doing push polling, will not be doing mass mailings that are filled with these outrageous personal attacks, I think we can have an agreement. I'd like to see those signed letters from all those different groups that you have counted on to flood this state. You know, I was in Tonawanda not so long ago, and I was at a senior center at a lunch, and an elderly woman, you know, reached up to shake my hand. She said, I'm so glad to see you in person because I've been getting the meanest mail about you. Well, I know that everybody in New York is getting flooded with mean mail.